Hello viewers. In the series of the most important and predictable themes for UPSC Prelims 2025, today we are going to discuss the background of the Acts of 1909 and so as 1919 and 1935. Last year in the predictable themes you have studied about Regulating Act 1773 to Government of India Act 1935. So please revise those acts also and add the theme that we are going to discuss right now. You can expect a question from this series. So अभिवादन स्वीकार कीजिए नीरज राव का कल्चर क्वांटम के इस अध्याय में. And now we are going to discuss the background of the acts of 1909 and so as 1919 and 1935. So let's start with the background of the Morley Minto reforms of 1909. It is named after Secretary of State Morley and Viceroy of India Minto. The very first background information is basically the visit of the Prince of Wales to India, who was there in India in between November 1905 to March 1906. And Prince of Wales, later he went on to become King George V. So while he was returning back from India, he had a suggestion to Morley. He said that the watchword for British rule in India should be sympathy. The second important background information related to Morley Minto reforms is basically the budget speech of Gopalakrishna Gokhale in March 1906. And in this historic speech, he has appealed to the British authority that conciliation with the British authority can only be possible when educated Indians are getting associated more and more with the administration of their country. Third important factor in Morley Minto reforms is the constitution of the A.T. Arundale Committee. This committee submitted its report in October 1906 and it also talked about what would be the future reforms. Moreover, it wanted the opinion of the local governments and so as the local representatives. So by the end of 1906, the report of the committee was sent to all the local governments for their opinion. Another very important factor behind the proposed reforms in 1909 was the Aligarh movement initiated by Sir Syed Ahmad Khan. And this movement gradually alienated Hindus from the Muslims, particularly in the political field. Moreover, there was anti-Hindu feeling when the Indian National Congress was getting created by the Aligarh movement leaders. Moreover, another thing that it is believed that this mechanization was possible due to the British officials influencing Sir Syed Ahmad Khan and so as the Aligarh movement leaders. The next important impetus to the proposed reforms in 1909 was basically a delegation led by Aga Khan, and this delegation went to Simla whereby they appealed to the Viceroy of India some reforms for the Muslim community. The standout reforms or concessions that they demanded from the Viceroy includes they asked that the representation of the Muslims, particularly political representation, must not be merely based on their numerical strength but also on the basis of the volume of their support to the British Empire and so as the effectiveness of the Muslim community in the continuation of British Empire in India. Aga Khan's delegation also appealed to the Viceroy that Muslims must get the right to send their own political representative through separate electorate. So this is the genesis of the idea of the separate electorate. They not only demanded this much, but they also demanded that there must be more participation, more inclusion of the people of the Muslim community in the civil services. In fact, they went on to say that civil services must be scrapped. They also wanted help of British in creating the Central Muslim University, and apart from it, they also wanted some sort of help of the British authority in education of the Muslim masses. Not only this, they also demanded to the British authority that there must be more number of the judges in high courts and so as the chief courts all over India. So now you got to know that what were the background info related to Morley Minto reforms of 1909. But it is to be noted that you must not be under any pre-assumption that Morley and Minto were on the same page. In fact, it was Morley who was very much against the separate electorate, and he had a point that if the Muslim masses can be given separate electorate, so in the general electorate also they will have a vote and they might have two votes. So he was not in the favor of separate electorate, but Minto wanted to go ahead with this divisionary tactics to divide the unity of the Hindu and the Muslim society and so as he is the one who favored the separate electorate provision. So let's explore the background info of Montagu-Chelmsford reforms of 1919. Montagu was the Secretary of State and Chelmsford was the Viceroy of India. And the background of this reform can be traced back to Lucknow Pact of 1916. In the Lucknow Pact of 1916, both Indian National Congress and Muslim League came together, and moreover, they have set aside their differences. They also supported each other's demands and claims, and then both of them demanded self-rule for India. This created some sort of pressure on the British authority when the two communities are coming together. The second very important reason behind the reforms of 1919 is Home Rule movement, which started in 1916 and continued very well till 1918. So Home Rule movement stirred the masses, and moreover, it created some sort of nervousness in the British officials in India. So during the Home Rule movement, when the masses were stirred, British authority tried repressive measures. They created a false case against Tilak, but this time Tilak was successfully defended by Muhammad Ali Jinnah. Then they arrested Mrs. Annie Besant, Arundale, and so as Wadia. But after the arrest of Mrs. Annie Besant, there was huge uproar all over India, and moreover, masses were turning little violent at this point of time. Looking at the reaction of the Indians, Secretary of State Montagu made a statement, a historic statement somehow related to the Indian mythology, that Shiva cut his wife into 52 pieces only to discover that he had 52 wives. This is what happens to Government of India when it interns Mrs. Annie Besant. So at the height of Home Rule movement, Mrs. Annie Besant was released, and moreover, British officials were nervous enough to appeal to the British authority in Britain that sent the reforms at an early date in India. In 1916 and 1917, Secretary of State was Austen Chamberlain, and he happened to be the first person who talked about realization of the self-government in India. So Austen Chamberlain, he made a statement. The statement was that it is not merely enough to increase the number of Indians in councils and legislatures. In fact, more responsibility must be vested in those Indians who are the part of these bodies. He further went on to say that the goal of the British government must be self-realization. He suggested to the British government that they must declare the goal in India must be development of self-governing institutions in the future course of time. And obviously it is the British government which can decide that what timeline it must be giving, but it must be declared for the Indians. When Austen Chamberlain was Secretary of State of India, that was the time when Edwin Montagu was Under Secretary of Government of India. He also seconded the opinion of Chamberlain, and he also went on to say that the Government of India is too wooden, too iron, too inelastic, too antediluvian to be of any use for the modern purposes that we have in view. Another very important background info related to Montagu-Chelmsford reform is the post-World War I scenario. During the World War I, that is from 1914 to 1918, large number of Indians supported British effort during World War I, and they had an expectation that after the war is over, substantial greater political autonomy would be given to the Indians. So, British cannot deny the fact that Indians have not supported them, and to seek their further association, they have to give in something to Indians. On this note, Under Secretary of India, Edwin Montagu made a statement: if you want to use the loyalty of Indians, you must give them higher opportunity to controlling their own destinies. And it created a great excitement in India. The political leadership of India welcomed the statement of Edwin Montagu, and so was the excitement that British appointed Edwin Montagu as the Secretary of State of India in July 1917. So after his appointment as the Secretary of State of India, Edwin Montagu made a historic statement on 20th of August 1917, and moreover, this statement is also called as August Offer of the Montagu. So what he exactly said: the policy of His Majesty Government in India, with which the Government of India is in complete accord, is that increasing association of Indians in each and every branch of administration and gradual development of self-governing institution with progressive realization of the responsible government of India as an integral part of the British Empire. So now you studied the background of Montagu-Chelmsford reforms of 1919. I would request you go through the last year video also and see that what were the provisions of the Montagu-Chelmsford reforms of 1919. As you know that no matter how difficult or easy the UPSC paper is, you will be getting a question from the acts, and that is from 1773 to 1935. So please add those portions to these background info also. Third and the most important act, as far as the foundational principles of the self-governing institutions in India is concerned, is the Government of India Act 1935. Government of India Act 1935 also served as a foundational principle to guide the writing of the Indian Constitution from 1946. So let's look at the background of the Government of India Act 1935. The very first thing goes back to the constitution of the Simon Commission. So Simon Commission was constituted on the recommendation of Alexander Muddiman Committee, which was constituted in 1924. And Alexander Muddiman Committee recommended the creation of Indian Statutory Commission, which came to be known as the Simon Commission, to review the provisions of 1919 Act and further recommend the new constitutional measures. But there was one thing about Simon Commission which egged all the Indian nationalists. That is, not even a single Indian, the most moderate, the most liberal, was the part of a commission which was going to decide the constitutional fate of India. Despite the appeals from the Indian nationalist side, not even a single Indian was accommodated when the commission was in India. So commission headed for the discussions with the provincial governments and the important leaders of India. But on the other hand, all the national parties of India, they initiated Simon boycott. So after the consultations were over, what were the recommendations of the Simon Commission? And you must remember the recommendation of the Simon Commission. So the recommendation of the Simon Commission was, it wanted end of the diarchy from the provinces. Then apart from it, it also suggested that there must be separation of Burma from the Indian government. Then it also made a case for the protection of the minority rights. And very important, that it suggested that there must be continuation of the communal electorate to safeguard the rights of the minorities in India. And in fact, these recommendations were accepted in the Government of India Act 1935 with a thumping majority. The second important background info related to 1935 Act is basically the conduct of the 3 roundtable conferences. And these 3 roundtable conferences were conducted because of the demand from the Indian side to give more autonomy to the Indian leaders in the governance of their country. So 3 roundtable conferences were conducted in Britain, and in all these 3 roundtable conferences, all the major parties of India, including Indian National Congress, and the representatives of the different communities were invited. So Congress participated in just 2nd roundtable conference. It did not participate in the 1st and the 3rd roundtable conference. So in the roundtable conference, series of negotiations, series of discussions happened. And after that, whatever the recommendations of the 3 roundtable conference, it got reflected in the Government of India Act 1935. The third important juncture in the realization of the 1935 Act was announcement of British Prime Minister Ramsay MacDonald, that is Communal Award, in 1932. This Communal Award was related to giving separate electorate to the depressed classes of India, and they would not be identified with the Hinduism. But these announcements led to some controversies also. In fact, Gandhi and Ambedkar were on the different page, and despite their differences, they agreed for Pune Pact, which later got reflected in the Government of India Act 1935. The last important background info of 1935 Act is the white papers based on the recommendations of the 3 roundtable conferences. These white papers are the policy measures to be implemented in India, were proposed in the British Parliament, and finally, after its acceptance, the Government of India Act was passed in the British Parliament in 1935, which further led to greater provincial autonomy in India. And as you also know, that it also proposed the scheme of a kind of federal government. But though the federation never became operational because some of the criteria were not fulfilled. So once again, I would suggest and recommend to you that please go through the video of the Culture Quantum of last year, where I have covered all the acts from 1773 to 1935, and please see all the provisions of the 1935 Act. One additional important topic from modern Indian history I would like to add is the life and the times of Dr. Muthulakshmi Reddy. She was born in Madras province, and moreover, she happens to be one of the initial medical practitioners of India. So she was a social reformer, she was a medical practitioner, and so as she was also Padma Bhushan awardee after the India's independence. When it comes to Dr. Muthulakshmi Reddy, there were many firsts to her name. The very first thing is that she happened to be the first female student who was admitted in a men's college. Then apart from it, she also happened to be the first women legislator of India, and she was elected in the Madras Corporation in 1926. Moreover, in the later times of her life, she came under the influence of Gandhi and Annie Besant, and she participated in the national movement also. One very well-known personality from the Indian freedom struggle, you also must be aware about him, that is Madan Mohan Malviya ji. Madan Mohan Malviya ji studied law and Sanskrit from Calcutta University, and later on he went on to found Banaras Hindu University in 1916, which went on to become the biggest residential campus university in Asia. So apart from it, what were the literary contributions of the Madan Mohan Malviya ji? That is something which is important for this year exam. So one contribution of Madan Mohan Malviya ji was writing the Hindi rendition of the epic written by Tulsidas, Ramcharitmanas. Then moreover, he also wrote a very famous article, Hindu-Muslim Unity, the Need of the Hour. And with this article, he has appealed for the communal harmony. Apart from it, he has also edited the newspapers like Hindustan and Abhyuday. Two more literature authored by Madan Mohan Malviya ji is Rashtriya Shiksha and Bharat Darshan, in which he is emphasizing on the education as the need of the hour for the development of India, and so as his love for India and India's culture in Bharat Darshan. Later on, in 2014, Madan Mohan Malviya ji, posthumously, he was awarded Bharat Ratna. Another very important personality from the freedom struggle phase of India is Tangaturi Prakasam Pantulu. He came to limelight during the Simon Commission's visit to India, and when the Simon boycott was going on, when Simon Commission visited Andhra, he was the one who spearheaded the campaign of boycott against the Simon Commission. Moreover, he was threatened by the British authority that if he moves ahead, he will be shot dead. But he was not fearful about anything, and he moved ahead bare-chested, and he claimed that if they really want to kill, they can kill him. He earned the title of Andhra Kesari, or Lion of Andhra, and later on in 1953, he went on to become the first Chief Minister of Andhra. Slogans played a very vital role in galvanizing the masses during the mass movement. So one of the very famous slogans in 1920s was Inqilab Zindabad. And when we talk about Inqilab Zindabad, so the name which comes to the mind is Bhagat Singh. But in reality, this slogan, this very evocative slogan was written by Hazrat Mohani Sahab in 1921, and later on it was popularized by Bhagat Singh and his comrades. Another very important slogan which was popular during the national movement and 1920s itself, that is Simon Go Back. So Simon Go Back slogan was written by Yusuf Meher Ali, and not only this, but it was Yusuf Meher Ali who also wrote the slogan or created the slogan Quit India. So please remember that these two slogans, and moreover who were the writers of these slogans. So I hope that this series of important and predictable topics of the modern Indian history will be very helpful to you in this year prelims, and you come out with the flying colors in this prelims of 2025. So wishing you best of luck for this year exam, and stay connected to Culture Quantum to know more topics from ancient medieval art and culture which can come in this year prelims. Till then, thank you to all of you, and please do not forget to share, subscribe, like, comment on the channel Culture Quantum. Thank you.